My name is Miles Camden, and I was in the middle of a tense negotiation with a potential client when my phone buzzed with an image from Jim next door. At first, I thought it was a harmless notification, maybe a photo of his kids playing in the yard or another invitation to Sunday barbecue. But the instant the screen lit up, breath lodged in my throat. 3 pictures, each one worse than the last. The workshop Dad and I spent years dreaming up, framed by rolling fields and late summer sun, now reduced to jagged boards and twisted beams. I stared at the flattened walls, the toppled workbenches, the mound of sawdust and metal, and for a moment I couldn't remember how to breathe. My heart thundered so loud I thought the other party on my call might hear it. So I excused myself with a clipped apology and stepped out into the hallway, voice echoing off the glass doors. Jim's second text arrived before I could clear my throat. Call me ASAP. Your brother-in-law destroyed it. I have video. The words smacked me harder than the visuals, a punch turning old grief into something more feral, more urgent. My father had built that workshop with me. Cancer took him 2 years ago, but every plank, every shelf, bore the imprint of his hands and mine. That space was a living memory, a sanctuary of wood smoke and whispered plans for the future. Seeing it razed by someone who was supposed to be family was like finding out someone had dug up his grave and danced on the soil. I ended the meeting abruptly. I need to reschedule, I said, though the client's recent impatience suggested they saw my reaction as weakness, and walked out onto the street, phone pressed against my ear before I even dialed. Callie answered on the second ring, voice trembling. Miles, I'm so sorry. Kellen said he was doing it for us. Called it liberating. Her words blurred into static grief and helplessness. He said you were hiding in there too much. I tasted bile at the thought of Kellen's smug justification. The man who couldn't tolerate wood and nails if they didn't serve his fragile ego. I didn't scream. I kept my voice low. Where is he now? Her sob caught in her throat. He's having a barbecue. He said it's a celebration. Call ended, and the silence that followed was louder than any accusation. I drove home with my knuckles white on the steering wheel, each red light a countdown to the wreckage waiting for me. Jim met me at the curb, his laptop under one arm, face ashen. He didn't need to say anything. I could see it in the screen's glow. He handed me the laptop, voice hollow. I tried to stop them. They said the property owner approved it. I pressed play on the video. Kellen striding out of his truck like a conqueror, signing paperwork in the sun with that arrogant tilt of his chin. He pointed at the workshop and barked an order. Then the machine roared to life, metal claws tearing through the roof, snapping beams like brittle bones. In minutes, everything Dad and I had built, board by board, vanished beneath clouds of dust. The destruction was brutal, almost gleeful. Every one of our initials carved into the hand-hewn beam was severed by industrial jaws. My lungs burned with a grief so raw it threatened to crack my voice. But instead I swallowed hard, stepped back, and closed the laptop. I'll see you inside, I said, though inside felt like rubble. I called Logan Bright, my attorney and college roommate, the moment I stepped through my front door. His calm voice at the other end was a lifeline. He did what? Logan's disbelief mirrored my own fury. I told him about the photos, the video, the text. I have every permit, every survey, every blueprint. That land is mine. He sighed, relieved. Send me everything now? We'll make him regret the day he picked up that bulldozer. Next, I called the demolition company. The rep on the line told me Kellen paid cash, $3,500, claimed to own the land, signed as owner. He promised to fax the documents. As I hung up, I realized Kellen truly believed he could destroy my past without consequences. I stepped into the wreckage and closed my eyes, letting my mind trace the path through memory. Here, my father and I poured the concrete foundation on a humid spring morning, his laughter echoing as we measured our ambitions against the horizon. There, the 1964 table saw he sold his vintage motorcycle to buy, the engine hum I still hear in my sleep. Over there, Dad's Japanese joinery set, each chisel blade sharpened to perfection, used to create drawers labeled in his elegant script. Drawers now emptied, the label shredded. I knelt and placed my hand on a splintered board, feeling the grain echo my father's voice teaching me geometry and patience. Callie appeared beside me, her face pale, tears in her eyes. She reached for my hand, and for a moment I felt everything collapse, hope, anger, sorrow all crashing together. I never imagined he'd go this far, she whispered. Her voice cracked. He said your shop was a prison. I shook my head. This isn't about our marriage. It's about a man who can't stand someone else finding peace. Logan arrived minutes later, property deeds and surveys in a battered folder, jaw set with righteous fury. He reviewed the land markers, cross-referenced every deed, and declared with certainty, "This is fraud, Miles. We'll file charges. Fraud, property destruction, impersonation. He'll pay." Even as I listened, the wind riffled through the broken rafters, and I realized I wasn't just mourning a building. I was mourning the echo of my father's presence, the highs and lows of sawdust afternoons, the quiet pride of our shared craft. The value of those memories couldn't be measured in dollars. But in the glare of that ruined site, I vowed to rebuild, not just the workshop, but the legacy Dad left me, as strong as oak and as determined as steel. I called Callie before I even pulled into the driveway. My hands still trembled on the wheel, the hum of the tires barely audible over the ringing in my ears. When she picked up, her voice was already thick with tears, as though she'd been waiting for the call and dreading it in equal measure. "Miles," she began, and the way she said my name, soft, weighted with guilt, confirmed what I already feared. "I'm sorry. I didn't say anything at first." I needed to hear the truth from her, raw and unfiltered. My jaw clenched as I waited. She sniffled. "Kellen said he was doing it for us, that he was trying to help. He said you were hiding in there too much, that the shop was taking you away from the family." My knuckles pressed hard into the steering wheel. I forced my voice to stay calm. "So he bulldozed it? Without saying a word to me? Without giving me a chance to stop him? He said it was an act of love," she whispered, and I could hear her breaking. "That you'd thank him later. That real men didn't need sheds to run from their families." I let out a bitter laugh, short, humorless, hollow. "Real men," I repeated under my breath. She tried again. "He thought." I cut her off. "No, don't explain him. Where is he now?" She hesitated. "He's at his house. He's hosting a barbecue. Said it was a celebration." I pulled into the driveway and stared at the shattered remains of what used to be my second home. That's when I ended the call. Not on her, but on the madness of it all. Because in that moment, the anger that had been simmering under my grief started to rise, thick and volcanic. It wasn't just about the destruction of wood and metal. It was about theft, of memory, of legacy, of peace. It was about a man who mistook control for care, who wielded force like it was wisdom, and who had just torn down the last place my father ever built with me. I stared at the rubble in front of me. The floor where Dad and I spilled paint arguing over trim. The wall where we hung our first joint project. A cedar table that still sat in our dining room. The corner where I kept his old thermos. The one that still smelled like sawdust and black coffee. All of it. Gone. Because Callie's brother decided I didn't need it. I drove slowly, deliberately, past the old oaks lining my street, past the neighbors pretending not to look, past the mailboxes I'd once helped install with Dad. Every mile to Kellen's house was a silent reminder of what I was about to face. I didn't have a weapon. I wasn't here to fight, not physically. I just needed to see his face. I needed to look into the eyes of the man who thought he was doing me a favor by destroying the most sacred place I had left. When I arrived, I didn't knock. The gate was wide open. Laughter spilled out from the backyard. I could smell ribs on the grill, hear the clink of beer bottles, and the murmur of a dozen conversations floating through the air like smoke. There he was, Kellen Royce, beer in hand, apron on, telling a story, probably one where he painted himself as the hero. His voice boomed across the patio, drawing out laughter like applause. I stepped onto the deck, and silence fell like a guillotine. He turned. "Oh," he said, with a crooked smile. "You made it." My pulse thundered in my ears, but I kept my steps slow, measured, controlled. "Didn't think you'd show," he added. "But I guess you know by now. Shed's gone. You're free, brother." "Free," I repeated. "Yeah, you don't have to hide in that wooden coffin anymore. Time to come back to life. Be present. Callie needs you. Your marriage needs you." I walked right up to him, stared into his eyes. "You think you did something noble," I said, "but all you did was break what wasn't yours." That shop wasn't just a building. It was a promise, a history. It was the last thing my father and I ever built together. He scoffed. "It was a distraction. You were disappearing into that place." Callie cried about it more than once. I saw the writing on the wall. I did what needed to be done. Did what needed. I cut myself off, biting down on the fury clawing its way up my throat. "You didn't ask," I said, quieter now. You didn't talk. You decided. You played judge, jury, and bulldozer. You didn't save my marriage. You violated it. You didn't help your sister. You humiliated her. You didn't fix me. You destroyed the one place I could still feel whole. The silence around us was deafening. Guests started backing away. Even the guy on the grill looked like he wanted to crawl into the propane tank. Kellen's smugness cracked for the first time. It was just a damn shed. No, I said. It was everything. And now, so help me, you're going to understand what it means to take something that doesn't belong to you. I turned and walked away. Because some men burn bridges. But Kellen? He bulldozed mine. And now, I was done trying to be the bigger man. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to threaten. I was going to bury him in paperwork, deeds, legal claims, damages, and consequences. He lit a match to my legacy. I was going to answer with fire and law. I parked at the bottom of my driveway and killed the engine, but the world didn't go quiet. Instead, every distant lawnmower, every barking dog, every muffled car radio sounded like a drumbeat tapping out a warning. My chest felt tight, like I had swallowed a brick, and sweat dampened my palms as I reached for the door handle. Jim stood at the top of the short stone steps, laptop tucked under his arm, eyes red-rimmed but steady. He didn't speak at first, just nodded toward the wreckage behind him. I swallowed hard and climbed the steps, each footfall a countdown to whatever truth he carried. He opened the laptop and angled it toward me. The afternoon light gleamed on the screen, illuminating the grainy footage of ruin. I pressed my hand to my mouth, fingertips cold against my lips. Jim cleared his throat. I told him to stop. God, Miles, I really tried. His voice cracked, and I could see the guilt etched into the slope of his shoulders. But apologies weren't enough. Not anymore. Not after what happened to the place Dad and I bled for. I pressed play. The video started with a wide shot of my workshop in its original glory, sunlight streaming through the skylights, dust motes dancing over the planked floor. In the corner stood my father's old anvil, a testament to his stubborn belief that hammer and iron could shape the world. Then the frame shifted, and there was Kellen, stepping out of his muddy pickup truck like he owned every inch of the property. He flashed his wallet to the camera, bending it open to reveal crisp bills and an official-looking ID. He looked directly at the lens, as if daring whoever was filming to question him. The camera jerked as the videographer shifted position, catching the gleaming claw of a bulldozer inching forward. The machine grumbled, metal teeth finding purchase in the cedar shingles Dad and I had painstakingly installed. I flinched at the sound, twisting wood, tearing nails, splintered boards. Every crack and creak resonated like the sigh of someone's bones breaking. In seconds, the roof gave way. A massive chunk slid down, sending a cloud of sawdust into the air. In that haze, the claw continued its relentless descent, ripping apart support beams and destroying the carved initials where Dad and I had etched our names. For a moment, everything hung in slow motion, the way the beam flexed and cracked, the way Kellen's face split into a triumphant grin, the dawning horror in the videographer's eyes. Then the camera shook as they backed away, the buzzing whir of the tracks cutting through the charged silence. The last shot was of the pile of rubble, an unrecognizable heap of wood, metal, and dust. I paused the video and closed my eyes, leaning my forehead against Jim's shoulder. The grief welled up so fiercely it felt like it would drown me. I could almost smell the faint trace of my father's pipe tobacco mingled with the scent of kiln-dried pine, the aroma that used to greet me every morning as I stepped into that shop. I could almost feel his rough hands on my shoulders, steadying me as we planned our next project. Those memories had been sealed away in that space, protected by four walls and the promise of countless afternoons lost to creation. And now it was gone, obliterated by a man who thought demolition was domestic devotion. Jim closed the laptop gently and handed it to me. I forwarded you the paperwork, he said softly. Signed documents. Kellen's handwriting. The company address and everything. I opened the file on my own phone, scrolling through the PDF that confirmed everything I needed to prove. Forged ownership transfer, falsified demolition permit, the cash payment receipt dated just 3 days ago. My jaw clenched until I thought my teeth might shatter. I folded the documents and slid my phone into my pocket. Thank you, Jim. My voice came out rough, gravelly, but I meant it. He'd risked more than I had to get me the truth. Jim pressed a hand to my arm. Let me know when you want to talk to a reporter. This is news where I live. He offered a weak apology. I'm sorry you're going through this. He didn't just tear down a building. He erased a history. I nodded, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream, to call everyone I knew and broadcast the injustice. Another part wanted to curl into a ball and weep until there was nothing left of the man who once built a life with his dad. But I straightened my shoulders and inhaled, tasting sawdust and determination on my tongue. Right now, I said, I need to get inside. I turned and climbed over the scattered beams, boots crunching on nails and splinters. My heart hammered as I stepped across the debris field. Piece by piece, I examined the broken fragments. The twisted hinge from the old storage cabinet, the shattered glass from the window where I first learned to plane wood, the scorched remains of the tool chest Dad had painted my name on. I knelt and traced my finger along a cracked board, feeling its rough texture beneath my skin, willing it to tell me there was still something worth saving. But the story in that rubble was clear. Someone had tried to erase it all. I stood and brushed dust from my jacket, facing Jim. Lock everything down, I said. We're going to file charges. I want evidence sealed, video copies notarized, the legal notices drafted. And then, I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. Then we rebuild. Jim offered a tentative smile. I'll get right on it, he said. I turned back to the devastation around me and let the weight of loss settle into resolve. The photographs that shook me once had ignited a fire that wouldn't burn out. My father's lessons, measure twice, cut once, would guide my next moves, each step precise, each action deliberate. I would marshal every ounce of grief, every memory of laughter echoing off wooden walls, into the foundation of whatever came next. And when my new workshop stood, stronger and more beautiful than before, I would carve a plaque that read, "What arrogance tore down, love and justice raised up." Because no matter how hard Kellen tried to bury my past, he underestimated the power of what we build together. And the legacy that lives on through every board, every nail, every heartbeat determined to carry it forward. I didn't post online. I didn't rant. I didn't scream. That wasn't how you built things that lasted. I made calls. The first was to Logan Bright, my closest friend from college, now one of the most meticulous attorneys I'd ever met. He was the kind of guy who didn't just read contracts. He rewrote them in red ink and made judges second-guess their own rulings. When he picked up, his voice was groggy, probably woken from a mid-afternoon nap, but alert enough when I said 2 words. He bulldozed it. Logan sat up straighter on the other end of the line, figuratively, at least. I could hear the shift in his tone, the legal gears grinding to life. He did what? My workshop. Dad's shop. Kellen hired a demolition crew. Said he was the property owner. Paid in cash. Told them to level it. There was a long silence. I could picture Logan rubbing his jaw, the way he always did when something didn't compute. Please tell me you have documentation. Proof it was on your land. I've got the original blueprints, I said, pacing across the remains of what used to be the side deck. Surveyor's maps, the deed, everything in my name. Send it all to me. Every inch. That's all I needed to hear. The second call I made was to the demolition company, Braden and Sons. The receptionist answered with a sing-song voice, cheerful in a way that felt inappropriate given what I was about to say. I'm calling about a job completed on my property. Yesterday. Cedar Hollow Road. Of course. Let me check. Her tone shifted when I gave the address. There was a beat of silence, then a shuffle of papers, and a sharper edge in her voice. You're Mr. Camden? Yes. Well, the order was signed by a Kellen Royce. He claimed to be the property owner. He's not. He never was. Another pause. Then, a soft, almost nervous, "Oh, who approved the job?" I asked. Who verified his ownership? She hesitated. He showed identification. Paid $3,500 in cash. He said it was time-sensitive. We didn't verify ownership beyond the signed release. I pinched the bridge of my nose. I need those documents. Every signature, every receipt, every photo. Email it to this address. I gave it to her. We'll cooperate fully, Mr. Camden, she said, and I could hear it out. The shift in her voice when she realized they might be in trouble too. I ended the call and stood there in silence, letting the wind brush over me. The wreckage no longer looked like chaos. It looked like evidence. I walked the perimeter of the site and imagined where each item used to live. Dad's antique vise had once been mounted on the west workbench, the one we built together during a rainstorm with mismatched lumber and stubborn laughter. I crouched where it had stood and found a shard of rusted iron in the dirt. Proof. And all around me, shards of stained pine, broken drawers with Dad's faded handwriting, splinters of mahogany from the bookshelf he swore would never tilt, and didn't. I took photos of everything. Not for social media. Not for sympathy. For documentation. By the time I got back inside the house, Logan had already started calling back. "This is good," he said after looking over what I'd sent. "Very good. I'm filing a cease and desist with Braden and Sons. We'll subpoena their full records next. Then we go after Kellen. Criminally." "Oh, yes," he said, almost with pleasure. "Forgery, fraud, property destruction, impersonating an owner. That's criminal. And civil. You'll get damages, Miles. You'll make him hurt." It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was acknowledgement. Accountability. Kellen had done something irreversible. And while nothing could bring the shop back the way it was, I could make sure he didn't walk away thinking he'd done me a favor. That night, I didn't sleep much. I sat in the garage, the last part of the house that still held Dad's smell, and sketched out a plan. Not blueprints yet, but an idea. The new workshop. Not just a replacement. An evolution. Larger. Brighter. With a loft up top and windows that opened onto the orchard. I'd use the same foundation if I could salvage it, pour new concrete if not. But I'd build it with the same care we had the first time. Measured, exact, purposeful. I found Dad's old ledger on the shelf, the one he used to track expenses when we first built it. His handwriting filled the margins, little notes, thoughts, jokes. Don't trust Miles with the nail gun. Let him make mistakes. That's how he'll learn. This kid is going to build more than furniture. I ran my fingers over the words until my hand shook. This wasn't just a shed. It never had been. It was a map of who I used to be, who my father believed I could become. The next morning, I dressed in work boots and jeans, the way I used to on early Saturdays with Dad. Callie watched me from the kitchen, eyes red but quiet. She handed me coffee, and for the first time in days, I saw something like strength return to her face. "What are you doing today?" she asked. "I'm going to rebuild," I said. "But first, I'm going to bury your brother in legal paperwork." She didn't flinch. She didn't defend him. She just nodded. "Good." I stepped outside with a folder in my hand, full of deeds and permits. The sun rose behind me, casting long shadows over the rubble. But I didn't see destruction anymore. I saw a foundation, steel and signatures, and I was ready to build again. The sky was gray the morning I stepped into the wreckage, the kind of muted overcast that made everything feel heavier. I didn't bring gloves. I wanted to feel it. Every splinter, every jagged edge, every damn reminder of what had been stolen from me. The bones of the shop still lingered in scattered fragments. My father's joinery cabinet, crushed flat beneath a steel beam. The drawers had been labeled in his slanted handwriting, and one had somehow survived intact. Dovetail pins, 3/8. I picked it up with trembling fingers and just stared at it. His handwriting, so casual and familiar, struck me harder than anything else had. It didn't just hold nails. It held memory. I crouched where the table saw used to be. The 1964 Rockwell, Dad's pride. He used to wax it weekly like it was a classic car, never let a single tool rest on its surface unless it was in use. Now, gone. Obliterated. Only a bent fragment of the cast iron table remained. I ran my hand along it, feeling the pitted edges where the demolition claw had torn through it. "Jesus," someone said behind me. I turned. Callie stood near the edge of the wreckage, both arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her eyes were already welling. She stepped carefully, gingerly, as though walking through a graveyard. And in a way, she was. "I didn't think it would look this bad," she whispered. "It's worse," I said, my voice hollow. She stepped beside me and looked down at the broken joinery drawer in my hand. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't need to. Her eyes widened, and her lip trembled. "He had beautiful handwriting," she said softly. "He labeled every drawer by hand," I murmured. "Said typing was too impersonal. If you care enough to store it, you care enough to write its name," he told me. Callie's hand shook as she reached down to pick up a splintered piece of oak. "I don't know who Kellen thought he was saving," she whispered, "but it sure wasn't me." I stood and faced her. He was never trying to save anyone. He was trying to control the narrative. He can't build anything, Callie. So he tears things down instead. She nodded slowly, tears now tracking her cheeks. He blamed his ex-wife's she shed for their divorce. Said she used it as an escape. I didn't realize, she trailed off, that he'd project his damage onto us? I said. That he'd bulldoze the last place where I still felt connected to my dad. I had no idea he was this far gone. We stood there together for a long while, just breathing in the dust and silence. And then headlights appeared at the edge of the driveway. A black sedan pulled up, the passenger door swung open, and Logan stepped out, suit immaculate, folder in hand, eyes narrowed like a man already halfway into a courtroom. "You weren't exaggerating," he said, stepping carefully around the debris until he reached us. "It looks like a war zone." "It was," I said. "He declared war without telling me." Logan flipped open his folder. "Here's everything we need: original property surveys, workshop permits, tax records, notarized deed copies, photos of the build stages, and the original contractor contracts, plus video evidence and the forged documents Kellen filed." Callie blinked. "He forged them?" "Yeah," I said grimly. "Signed as me. Gave them a demolition order with a fake owner authorization. Claimed he was acting in my best interest." Logan handed me a sheet. "I filed a criminal complaint with the county. Detective Sandoval's coming by tonight. He's already reviewed the basics." As Logan knelt to snap photos of the more intact fragments, I moved to the far wall, or what used to be a wall. The beam we carved our initials into had been split clean through. I crouched beside it and stared at the letters, MC plus DC. Dad used to joke that it looked like a couple's carving, but it was just Miles Camden and Daniel Camden, father and son. A team. This was his favorite spot, I said to no one in particular. He liked the light that came in through the side window. Said it reminded him of his dad's barn. Callie walked over and knelt beside me. "We're going to rebuild it," she whispered. "Together." I looked over at her. There was a kind of pain in her eyes that I recognized, a guilt she hadn't spoken aloud. "I didn't stop him," she said. "I thought he was bluffing. I thought if he tried something, I could talk him down. But I didn't move fast enough." I took her hand. "You didn't swing the claw." "He did." Just then, Logan stood, brushing off his trousers. "I did a rough estimate of damages," he said. "Custom structure, vintage tool inventory, permits, and emotional distress." He held up a sheet. "Total value so far, about $130,000. And we haven't even factored in punitive damages yet." Callie's jaw dropped. "He's going to lose everything." I looked down at the initials again, then up at the broken beams. Good. Because this wasn't just property loss. It was generational theft. My dad's legacy, ripped from the earth by someone who didn't understand its worth. Logan closed the folder. "Let me do the talking when the cops arrive." I nodded. And when the three of us walked back to the house, I looked one last time over my shoulder. The shop was gone. But my resolve was just beginning to take shape. Because there are some things you can't bulldoze. And a father's memory is one of them. Detective Sandoval arrived just after 7 p.m., pulling up in an unmarked cruiser with a quiet authority that somehow made the air feel heavier. He stepped out with a notepad already in hand, his sharp eyes scanning the wreckage with an expression that landed somewhere between disbelief and recognition. A younger officer followed behind him, Lee, I would learn later, carrying a camera and what looked like a rolling evidence kit. "This it?" Sandoval asked, eyes fixed on the twisted pile of lumber and memory behind me. "This is it," I said. "My shop, or what's left of it." He gave a short nod, then motioned for Officer Lee to begin photographing the scene. She got to work immediately, moving like someone used to documenting the aftermath of things no one had time to stop. Meanwhile, Sandoval flipped open his notepad and looked at me. "Mr. Camden, I understand you believe your brother-in-law, Kellen Royce, was responsible for the unauthorized demolition?" "I don't believe," I said. "I know. I have video, paperwork, witness testimony, and a signed demolition order. Fake, by the way, with my name forged." Sandoval raised a brow but didn't challenge it. Instead, he nodded toward Logan, who stood a few feet away with the confidence of someone born to make people regret skipping fine print. "And you are Logan Bright," he said, offering a hand. "Legal counsel for Mr. Camden. I have all documentation in this folder, including the deed to the property, dated permits, photographic evidence of the structure's presence prior to demolition, and records of the demolition company's transaction with Mr. Royce." Sandoval took the folder, flipping through the documents with a practiced eye. His brow furrowed as he reached the demolition order. "He signed as the owner." "Yes," Logan replied, "and he paid in cash, $3,500. Braden and Sons didn't verify ownership beyond the signature and photo ID. Sandoval's eyes narrowed. That's going to be a problem. For both him and possibly the company. He looked back at me. Did you give anyone permission to remove or alter anything on this property? No, I said. This workshop was built by me and my father, on land we've owned for 20 years. My wife and I live here. Kellen doesn't own a square inch of it. What was inside the structure? I took a breath. Vintage woodworking equipment. A 1964 Rockwell table saw. A Japanese joinery set my father left me. Thousands in raw materials, oak, maple, walnut, hand tools, personal effects. My father's handwritten labels on every drawer. Some of them destroyed, some stolen. Stolen? He echoed. Some items weren't found in the rubble, Logan interjected. Either looted during or after demolition. Sandoval made a note. Did Mr. Royce ever mention his intent to do this? Not to me, I said. To my wife, yes. He told her I was hiding in the shop too much. Claimed he was helping our marriage by eliminating the distraction. She thought he was venting. He was planning. And now he's... Sandoval tilted his head. Where is he? I resisted the urge to laugh. Celebrating. He threw a barbecue the day it happened. Called it Freedom Day. I've got screenshots from his Facebook post. Logan handed those over too. Sandoval reviewed them without flinching. Real men don't hide behind wooden nails. That's bold. And stupid. He closed the folder. Mr. Camden, this isn't just a civil dispute. This is criminal fraud, destruction of property, impersonation, and potentially burglary if we can prove theft. My throat tightened. So you'll press charges? We will, he said, without hesitation. We'll be issuing a warrant for Mr. Royce's arrest by morning. I'll also be recommending charges against the demolition company if we find out they failed to do basic due diligence. It was a strange feeling, vindication soaked in grief. I wasn't cheering. I wasn't fist-pumping. I just nodded and looked back at the broken bones of my past life. Thank you. Sandoval gave me a nod and turned to Officer Lee, who was now bagging what looked like one of Dad's scorched chisels. Get statements from the neighbors, he told her. Especially the one who filmed the video. She nodded and moved off toward Jim's house. When Sandoval turned back to me, his tone softened a little. You know, he said, I used to help my grandfather build cabinets in a garage just like this. I get what it meant to you. I nodded once, words caught behind my tongue. He closed his notepad. We'll be in touch. When they were gone, Logan stayed a few minutes longer. We stood in silence, the cool air tugging at the edges of our shirts, the last rays of sun cutting across the yard like a line drawn between then and now. You okay? Logan finally asked. No, I said honestly, but I'm not broken either. He offered a small, quiet smile. Then you're ahead of the curve. After he left, Callie came outside, barefoot in the grass, her arms wrapped around herself. They're really going to arrest him? They're going to do more than that, I said. They're going to teach him that actions have consequences. She stepped up beside me, and for a long moment, we just stared at the crater in our lives. You're going to rebuild it, aren't you? She asked. I nodded slowly. I have to. She looked down at the dirt beneath her feet. Can I help this time? I turned to her. Yeah, I said, voice low. This time, I want us to build it together. Because now it wasn't just about what had been lost. It was about what could still be created. 2 days after the police visit, Callie's phone rang during breakfast. We were sitting in silence, her with her tea, me pushing toast around a plate I hadn't touched. I knew that ring on. Kellen's. I glanced up, and she met my eyes with a look I couldn't quite read. Guilt. Resentment. Maybe both. She let it ring once, twice, 3 times, and then swiped to answer. Hello. Her lips parted slightly as the voice on the other end launched in. Then she turned the screen toward me. Put it on speaker, I said, my voice low but firm. She tapped the button, and his voice filled the kitchen, sharp, defensive, and completely unrepentant. Miles, you seriously got me arrested over a damn shed? I stood up slowly, bracing my hands on the edge of the table. No. I got you arrested over felony-level property destruction, impersonation, and fraud. You're blowing this out of proportion, man. I did you a favor. You were isolating yourself in that place, hiding from your own wife, your responsibilities. I brought you back to reality. Callie winced beside me. I could see the pain in her eyes at hearing him talk that way, so confidently, so condescendingly, as if he hadn't reduced our lives to splinters and ash. You think bulldozing my father's legacy is some kind of intervention? I asked. You think that earns you applause? I think, Kellen snapped, that real men don't need hideouts. They face their problems. They don't build tiny kingdoms and call it healing. That one cut. I felt it in my chest, like someone had taken a chisel to my ribs. But I didn't let it show. And real men, I said, don't use their sister's marriage as an excuse to wage war on their own insecurities. You couldn't stand that I built something with my hands, something permanent, something you'll never understand. He scoffed. You always thought you were better than everyone else. With your blueprints and your quiet little life. You think that place made you a man? That sawdust and wood glue made you important? It made me whole, I said. It made me more of a man than you'll ever be. You destroy because you've never created anything worth keeping. The silence on the line stretched for a second. You want to know what really pisses me off? Kellen said suddenly. It's how you've got everyone falling over themselves to defend you. Even Callie. Especially Callie. You're not some saint, Miles. You're just a guy who got too attached to a damn shed. I glanced at my wife. Her face was pale, but there was fire behind her eyes now. You're right, I said. I got attached. I got attached to the one place that still held my dad's voice. To the tools he left me. The work we did together. I got attached to peace, Kellen. And you couldn't stand that someone else found it. Whatever, he snapped. You won't win. I've got friends. Lawyers. You'll run out of money before I do. You have no idea what you started, I said. And then I ended the call. Not out of anger, but because anything I said after that would have given him power he didn't deserve. Callie let the phone fall to the table. We both stared at it for a moment. The kitchen so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. He still doesn't get it, she said softly. He really believes he helped. He never learned the difference between help and harm. I rubbed a hand over my face. But the court will teach him. The world will teach him. She nodded slowly, then stood and walked around the table. Her arms slid around my waist and her head rested against my chest. I'm sorry, she said. For him. For not stopping it. For every second you spent grieving something that should still be standing. I wrapped my arms around her. We can rebuild the walls. But what he did to the past, my throat tightened. That doesn't go away. That afternoon, Logan sent over a stack of finalized filings. The civil suit had been filed, and the criminal proceedings were underway. Kellen had posted bail, but the charges, felony-level destruction, impersonation, and fraud, were not going anywhere. And neither was I. I spent the rest of the day cataloging. Every missing tool, every ruined piece of furniture, every shattered frame. There was no price tag for the sawdust soaked in my dad's sweat. No invoice for memories you built one board at a time. But we listed it all, down to the last nail. Logan called as I was reviewing the photos again. He's going to feel this, Miles, he said. The judge is already not a fan. We've got everything lined up. The demolition company's folding. They've already admitted negligence and will likely settle. But Kellen? He's going to bleed. I didn't smile. This wasn't revenge. This was justice. That night, I stood in the yard where my shop used to be. The moon hung low, casting pale light over the foundation that still bore the outline of what once stood. I knelt down and ran my fingers along the edge of the concrete. Callie came out with 2 mugs of cocoa. She handed me one and sat beside me in the grass. Remember the first time I came out here? She said. You showed me the hand-carved drawer set your dad built. You let me sand down that crooked table leg for hours even though you could have done it in 5 minutes. You were proud of that table leg, I said. I still am. She smiled and leaned against my shoulder. We'll make new ones. I took a sip of the cocoa. We will. Because Kellen thought he'd torn something down. But what he didn't understand was that what Dad and I built, it didn't live in lumber. It lived in me. And he couldn't bulldoze that if he tried. It started with a hashtag. That's how it always starts these days. Not with a quiet apology or a backroom settlement, but with a digital spark, a stupid, arrogant post tossed into the world like a match into dry brush. Kellen's post had everything I expected from him and more, a photo of himself leaning against a cooler at the demolition site, beer in one hand, smug smirk in full display. The caption read, "Finally freed my sister's husband from his shed prison. Real men don't hide behind wooden nails. Hashtag demolition day, hashtag no more man caves, hashtag freedom from the sawdust." By the time Logan forwarded it to me, the post had already been shared over 3,000 times. The comments section was a minefield of public rage, disbelief, and dark comedy. Some people didn't even know the full story and were still ripping him apart. Others had seen the police reports, the screenshots, the court filings. And the rest? They were just enjoying the rare moment when a self-proclaimed alpha male got exposed as a fraud. "This is going to help your case," Logan had said, voice calm and clinical. Jurors remember arrogance, especially documented arrogance. And just like that, the court of public opinion became an unexpected ally. It didn't take long before local news picked it up, then regional outlets. By the end of the week, a few national legal blogs were running headlines like, "Brother-in-law destroys family workshop, now faces felony charges, freedom from sawdust, how a barbecue and a bulldozer backfired." They even ran a clip of the body cam footage from Officer Lee. Just a few seconds of me standing in front of the wreckage, identifying tools, holding up what was left of my father's joinery set with shaking hands. I didn't want the attention, but I didn't run from it either, because people needed to know what destruction dressed as help looked like. Kellen, meanwhile, went dark. No more posts. No more pictures. Not even a defense. His lawyer, a stiff, overconfident man named Claremont, issued a statement to the press calling the entire ordeal a tragic misunderstanding between family members. But it wasn't tragic. It was criminal. And the courtroom didn't run on family excuses. It ran on evidence. The trial date came faster than expected. The county judge, stern, middle-aged, and no-nonsense, was already annoyed that her docket had to make space for a case she later called as avoidable as it was arrogant. Claremont tried to paint Kellen as a man concerned for his sister's emotional well-being. That argument dissolved within 5 minutes of the prosecution playing the Facebook post on the projector screen. Even the jurors smirked. The video Jim played next. Kellen striding across my lawn like a man auditioning for a low-budget Western, gesturing with false authority, telling the demolition crew to clear it all out, burn it to the dirt if you have to. The jury saw the claws sink into my roof, saw the place collapse, heard the moment something irreplaceable cracked, not just wood, but something deeper. When the demolition company's foreman took the stand, he tried to distance himself, blaming their lack of verification protocols. We were told he was the owner. He paid in full, had ID. "And did you verify ownership with the county?" the prosecutor asked. "No," the man muttered. "He said it was urgent." Kellen sat through it all with a blank expression, but I knew that face. That was the look of a man who still didn't believe consequences were real. Then it was my turn on the stand. I wore my father's old watch, the one that ticked just a bit too loud. I told them about the workshop, not as a building, but as a memory. I talked about how Dad and I built it over the course of 2 summers. About the table saw, the drawers, the joinery set he saved up for by working overtime at the mill. I told them how it became my second home after my dad passed. Not a retreat, but a place to breathe. When I said the words, he bulldozed the last place I could hear my father's voice. The courtroom went still. Not even the judge looked away. The civil suit followed the verdict. Kellen was found guilty of felony destruction of property, impersonation, and filing false documents. The sentence? 2 years probation, community service, and a fine. But the real blow came next. Damages. Logan stepped up with the precision of a surgeon, dissecting every cost: custom structure, $32,000 vintage tool inventory, $46,000 specialized lumber and materials, $18,000 permits and compliance documents, $4,000 emotional distress, $50,000 punitive damages, $100,000 total, $250,000. Kellen's lawyer objected, of course, called it grossly inflated. The judge disagreed. She called it restrained, considering the magnitude of loss. The final judgment stood. He had to sell everything his house, his boat, even his work truck. His landscaping business crumbled within 5 months. Turns out no one wants to hire a man who thinks demolishing private property is an acceptable love language. Callie didn't celebrate. Neither did I. But there was a quiet sort of peace that came with justice. A stillness. One night, weeks after the verdict, we sat in the backyard, right where the workshop used to be. The ground had been cleared. Clean. Ready. "What now?" Callie asked. I handed her a fresh set of blueprints. Now we build, not just to replace, but to remember. We would honor what was lost. Frame the photos, the fragments, the drawer that still held Dad's handwriting. And when the first wall went up, we'd mount a plaque near the door that said, "Destroyed by arrogance, rebuilt by love," because he thought a claw and a lie could erase a legacy. But you can't bulldoze what's rooted in memory. And you sure as hell can't kill what you never understood. Kellen didn't attend the sentencing. His lawyer stood in for him, offering a generic statement about regret and miscommunication. But there was no apology, no ownership, just silence and paperwork. A week later, we got word from Logan. The first check had bounced. The second was only partial. And then came the final update. He was liquidating everything. Kellen had to sell his house. That hit harder than I expected, not out of satisfaction, but because it confirmed something I had suspected for a long time. Kellen wasn't just arrogant. He was reckless and broke. The house was his pride, built on loans and leased equipment, bought with swagger and sold in disgrace. Next went his boat, the one he never stopped bragging about. Then the company truck, plastered in decals that used to read Kellen Royce Landscaping. We build backyards that last. The irony wasn't lost on me. His business? Gone within 5 months. Clients pulled out after the story hit the local press. Turns out people get uneasy when the man in charge of sustainable projects is on probation for felony demolition. When he posted a desperate "we're rebranding" video on social media, the comments were brutal. The internet doesn't forget. Especially not hashtags like #NoMoreManCaves attached to footage of a man illegally bulldozing another man's legacy. Callie and I didn't talk about him much anymore. The trial was behind us, and in its place, something new had begun. We rebuilt, but not the same, not a replica. The original workshop was intimate, weathered, a 2-person structure filled with memory. This time, we designed something larger, not because I wanted more space, but because we'd earned it. Because we were building not just for preservation, but for participation. Callie stood beside me when the first delivery of lumber arrived. She helped mark the measurements on the concrete slab, her handwriting next to mine on the fresh chalk lines. Her hair was tied back, and her jeans were dusted with sawdust by noon, but I'd never seen her look more at home. "This isn't just a rebuild," she said, resting her hand on the edge of the workbench frame we had laid out. "It's a resurrection. We built slow, week by week, wall by wall." I refused to rush it. If the first shop was a tribute to my dad, this one was a tribute to survival, ours. We framed the back wall first. I remember standing it up together, the early morning sun casting long shadows on the grass behind us. Callie pushed the level into place, grinning when the bubble centered. "Straight as hell," she said. I laughed, the sound echoing through the open frame. We poured our grief into the structure. Every nail was driven with intention. Every board was placed with care. She helped me install the new windows, wide, east-facing glass that flooded the space with morning light. We hung new cabinets but used the old drawer labels where we could. I found a piece of the original joinery drawer, Dad's handwriting barely intact, and mounted it in a shadow box above the door. The past didn't vanish. We gave it a home. Callie was there for every cut, every sanding pass, every late-night blueprint review. There was no wall between us anymore. Not like before. Not like when I used the shop to disappear. "I used to think I wasn't welcome here," she told me one night as we worked side by side under the soft glow of a hanging bulb. "That it was your place, and I was just married to the man who belonged to it." "You are welcome here," I told her. "You always were. I just didn't know how to open the door." The roof went on in the 3rd week of July. Logan came by with a 6-pack and a grin. "This looks better than the original," he said, walking the perimeter with lawyerly precision. "You're not just rebuilding. You're setting an example." We even gave the new space a name. Not just Dad's workshop anymore. We named it Camden and Company, a nod to legacy and a promise to the future. Because this time, it wasn't just mine. The neighbors came by in waves, watching the project take shape. Jim brought us coffee on early mornings and held up frame panels while I secured brackets. Mrs. Harlan from across the street, whose late husband had once helped me tile the old shop's floor, left us a note tucked in our mailbox that read, "He'd be proud. I'm sure your father is too." I found myself smiling more, sleeping better, breathing easier. Callie started painting again on the weekends, at the bench near the north window. She said the light was just right for it. And every now and then, I'd glance up from the workbench and see her standing there, brush in hand, completely focused. Not mourning, not surviving, creating. And that's when I realized something simple but undeniable. Kellen thought he'd taken everything, but he only took the shell. He couldn't touch the roots. He couldn't touch what was built into the grain of who we were. So we honored it. We built a corner shelf just for Dad's thermos and his old watch. We framed one of his shop notes, yellowed but legible, "Leave room to adjust. Everything worth building takes more than one try." When we stood back and looked at it, our shop, our story, rebuilt beam by beam, I didn't feel bitterness anymore. I felt gratitude. Because what Kellen destroyed forced something buried in me to rise. And what we built in its place, that was stronger than anything a claw or lie could ever reach. And this time, the foundation wasn't just concrete. It was us. A few weeks after we completed the shop, new roof, polished floors, the scent of cedar still clinging to the air like memory. I heard small footsteps running up the gravel path that led from the back porch to the sliding barn door we'd left open. It was Riley, Callie's nephew, 8 years old, buzz cut, sneakers coated in dried mud, and that look on his face kids always wear when they're curious but trying to pretend they're not. I was smoothing out the top of a walnut side table I'd been carving for a client when he paused just inside the threshold. He didn't say a word at first, just stared, eyes wide, scanning everything. The pegboards, the label drawers, the row of clamps on the far wall. I'd seen that look before, on my own face, standing beside my father. "You can come in," I said gently, brushing sawdust from the surface of the table. He stepped forward cautiously. "My mom says I shouldn't bother you." I gave a small smile. She's probably right about a lot of things. But not that. He walked up to the bench and leaned on it, nose barely clearing the top. "Did you really build all of this?" "I did," I said. "Well, me and Callie. Some of it, anyway. The rest was memory." He looked confused. "Memory?" I gestured to the framed drawer label above the door. "My dad built the first version of this shop with me. We lost him a while ago, but what he taught me is still here." Riley nodded like he understood. He didn't. Not really. But he was listening, and sometimes that's the beginning of everything. He watched in silence for a while as I returned to my carving. The hand plane moved in steady strokes across the edge of the walnut slab, curls of wood peeling away like ribbons. His eyes widened. "Can I try?" I paused. He was young, but his hands were steady, and his posture told me he wasn't just there to watch. He wanted to understand. I handed him the plane. He gripped it like it was made of glass. "Okay," I said. "Two hands. Let it glide. Don't push too hard. The blade will do the work." He set it down, guided it slowly across the grain, and laughed when a perfect curl rose from the wood and fell to the floor. "That's awesome. Feels like magic the first time, doesn't it?" "Yeah." He glanced around. "Is this your man cave?" I chuckled softly, shook my head. "No, not a man cave." "Then what is it?" I took a moment before answering. "Caves are for hiding. This place. This is for building." He seemed to chew on that, nodding slowly. "Uncle Kellen said it was your she shed." My hands paused, just for a second. "Uncle Kellen never built anything but excuses," I said, carefully. "This shop doesn't belong to one kind of person. It's for anyone who respects the tools, who wants to learn, who wants to create instead of tear down." He looked down at the plane in his hand. "I want to build stuff." "Then you're in the right place," I said. "You ever use a drill press?" His eyes lit up like I'd offered him a trip to space. The rest of that afternoon passed like it used to with Dad, slow, patient, full of instruction and clumsy success. Riley drilled 2 crooked holes into a scrap board and cheered like he'd split the atom. He asked 1,000 questions. About tools. About wood. About what I was like when I was his age. I answered every one. And when Callie came down the path to bring us lemonade, she stood in the doorway for a while without saying anything. I saw her wipe at her eyes. Maybe from the sun. Maybe not. That night, when Riley was gone and the crickets started humming outside, Callie and I sat in the open shop, leaning against the wall under the loft beam we'd carved our initials into. It mirrored the one my father and I had carved decades earlier. Only this one was new. Shared. She sipped her drink and looked at me across the room. "Do you miss it? The old shop?" I asked. "Yeah." I leaned back against the wood. "Every day. But you're not angry anymore." I thought about that. "No," I said finally. "Because this time, when we built, we did it as a team. And what we made, it's bigger than what we lost." She smiled. "And Riley, he's hooked. Told me he's saving up to buy a block plane." She laughed. "That's exactly how it starts." There was a quiet moment between us then. The kind that only comes when you've survived something that tried to unravel you. "Kellen reached out again," she said. I didn't respond. I looked at her, and she met my eyes. He sent an apology, she added after a pause. A real one this time. Said he realizes now what he destroyed. That he thought he was protecting me, but that he was really just jealous. Of the peace we had. Of the love. I nodded slowly. I didn't feel vindicated. Or even satisfied. Just done. Some people learn after the damage, I said. Some people never do. She took my hand. I'm glad you didn't stay silent. I'm glad you fought. I didn't want to fight, I replied. I just wanted to protect what mattered. Her eyes softened. You did. We sat there for a long time after that, watching the shadows stretch and then disappear entirely as the light shifted. The shop glowed under a single hanging bulb. Not grand, not flashy, but real. This place had been built on grief, and resilience, and love, and now it was home again. The next day, Riley came back. This time, with a notebook filled with sketches of what he called the greatest treehouse ever invented. He asked me if we could build it one day. I told him yes. And when we do, we'll use the same joinery techniques my father taught me. The same hand tools that survived. The same mindset. Because Kellen bulldozed a building. But he didn't kill a legacy. He accidentally sparked a new one. This shop wasn't just a rebuild. It was proof. Proof that some things can't be destroyed, not by jealousy, not by steel, not by arrogance. And as Riley shaved curls of pine from the edge of a plank with the same plane I once learned on, I knew the truth. My father's voice still lived here. Not in echo, but in action. In the hands of a child learning to shape wood with care. In the eyes of a woman who stood beside me through ruin and helped build something better. And in mine. Because the man I became wasn't the man who lost a shop. He was the man who built again. This time not alone, but surrounded by people who finally understood the value of what we create when we refuse to be broken. Legacy, I'd learned, isn't what you leave behind. It's what you teach while you're here. And no bulldozer can ever take that away.